Hello and welcome to The Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. It is listeners like you that make this job so enjoyable. I know that I love doing my job, and I love even more knowing that you're enjoying it. Great big old thank you for that. Now, in today's show, I have been wanting to talk to this guy for some time. I don't know why. I guess, and I hadn't even read his books prior to this conversation, but I knew of him. I knew of his reputation. I also knew about his mutual admiration for a particular company who built his website that you're going to hear about inside the show today. We share the same web host, authorbytes.com. And so I knew of him, but then I picked up the book Cold Snap. Mark Cameron is my guest today. And boy, like you'll hear in the show, he describes cold like nobody's business. And he knows all about it because he lives in Alaska, where they know more than a little bit about cold. So let me start flapping my gums and let's just get on to it, because Mark is waiting in the green room right here on the Thriller Zone. Dadgum, you're a handsome man.
Yeah, well, not encumbered by all that nice hair. That's what it is.
Mark Cameron, how are you, buddy?
I'm better than I deserve. How are you doing?
I'm so good. I've been so looking forward to this. I don't know what it is. I think because I spend too much time stalking you on Twitter and watching you fish and all that.
That's hilarious. Hilarious. Watching my wife fish. I just hang out with a notepad and write in the background.
That's a good job if you can get it, huh?
Yeah, no kidding. We're in a good spot for that.
Tell me
where are you coming from?
Dreadful, dreary San Diego.
Oh, there you go. Too bad. Feel for you.
I'm gonna bring this up later. No, I'm gonna save it for later because I got a whole track of things to say.
Awesome.
But yeah, San Diego is certainly part of the conversation. What's the weather like in your neighborhood right now?
You know, it's warming up. It's spring breakup, so it's dusty and muddy and a mixture of the two. We still have little piles of snow outside, but they're going away quick.
My stepson is stationed in Fairbanks, and he just got up there not long ago, and he said, "Man, these days are short."
Yeah, we're getting longer and longer. In fact, we stepped outside last night about 11 o'clock to check and see if there was northern lights, and it was still the sunset. So we just went to bed. So yeah, we're getting longer and longer days right now. Fairbanks is a little, they're towards the Arctic Circle. They actually have longer days than us as the summer wears on.
Oh, who knew?
Shorter in the winter, much shorter in the winter.
And Northern Lights, I've seen it in photographs, I've seen it in videos, never seen it in person. Tell me what that looks like.
You know, it depends on the night. We've gone out in our driveway and they've just been, they're there 1 minute, gone the next, and you turn around and go inside and the whole sky lights up green. It's kind of like, that green fog in the 10 Commandments that came around and killed all the firstborn. It's kind of like that, all flowing around overhead, except much bigger and brighter and certainly happier.
And excuse the ignoramus here sitting across from you, but what does that come from?
It's where all the sun, the ionized particles from the sun are hitting the poles, and so you have it down the Australia Borealis, or Borealis Australis, I can't remember how they say it, and then up here the Aurora Borealis. I guess it's Aurora Australis is what it's called. So just the light hitting where the poles, magnetic poles, come together, and it's kind of energized. So most of the time here we get green, but when you have a really good night, we happened to be down in Texas when they had the really good night about a week ago, but they had greens and reds and yellows and purples, and it's pretty awe-inspiring when you're standing under it.
Man, I bet. I can only imagine. Well, we are going to get to Cold Snap here shortly. This was a heck of a ride.
Thank you.
Heck of a ride. Drops in 1 week, less than a week actually. book number 4 in the Arliss Cutter series. We're going to get to that, but I want to drill down and get to know you a little bit better than I do. You know, everyone knows the legendary Mark Cameron, so I want to. For those who don't, we're going to drill on you.
Hilarious.
So let's just do this real quick. So let's see, from cop to mounted cop to detective to U.S. Marshal. So I'm guessing with a background such as yours, I'd say you're pretty. What's the word? I was going to say substantial, dude. Meaning, I doubt that there's little that spooks you. Would that be safe to say?
I thought you were saying with a background like that, I'm fat and old, but that's substantial. That could be the same thing. No, yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty, I think I've seen a lot, and it's interesting because both my sons have spent time in law enforcement. My oldest for about 5 years in federal law enforcement. He's a physician now, and then the youngest has been with Anchorage PD for about 8 years, and they're both pretty hard to ruffle guys. So yeah, it does that. So you'd run out of surprises, but stuff still surprises me. Stuff still surprises me.
You know, and being a writer, and with the imagination that you have, I would say that while not a lot surprises you, it's got to be constant great fodder, both pulling back on memories of the past as well as what you see around you for these books. I mean, you're a prolific writer.
Yeah, that's the fun part. I think kind of harkening back, I retired from the marshals in 2012, in December of 2012, and the deputies that worked with me made me a really cool little um, picture book over the years. We spent a lot of time uh, out in bush Alaska, rural Alaska, and that was kind of my theme, if you will, while I was the chief deputy here. And so a lot of that kind of harkens back to villages in western Alaska and far northern Alaska, and down on the islands in southeast Alaska. So sometimes when I'm writing a cutter, which all take place here, I'll just go back and sort of flip through my memory book like a retired old dude and just remember back. And then I go to my son and say, hey, can I hang out with you and the SWAT team and listen to the way people talk 10 years down the road. So I get it both ways. It's kind of fun.
That would be cool. I can see how different span of time would create a slightly different dialogue, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, you go back and watch Hill Street Blues.
Yeah.
Cops don't talk that way anymore. If they do, they get laughed at by their cohort. I mean, the young people that I was hiring towards the end of my career were so much more well versed in hunting bad guys electronically, where we used a lot of boot leather and really were on the ground, and they still do that. But just it's like my grandkids know much more about iPads and the internet and computer technology than I do. So um, it's a new, to get the vernacular right, you sure have to hang out with the crowd that you're writing about.
That is so spot on. You can always spot the folks. I'm certainly guilty of that in some of my earlier books. You can always spot the guys who's like, "Oh, you haven't actually been around that,
Yeah,
have you?"
exactly.
Because
Exactly.
they don't really talk like that.
Yeah, exactly. Or one place or another. I was working the protection detail at the United Nations General Assembly that Marshal Service will loan us to the State Department once in a while, because we get trained in protecting federal judges and protected witness and whatnot. So diplomatic security will borrow deputy marshals and then assign them to, I can't remember who I was on. That I think I was on maybe India. I did China. These are all foreign ministers, so it'd be equivalent to our Secretary of State. Egypt, Japan, several trips I went out there. But I was, standing at a urinal in the Waldorf Astoria, and this NYPD detective is doing his business next to me, and he kind of looked over and goes, "What kind of Roscoe you got?" And I thought, do we even say that word? What's a Roscoe? But to him in 1985, that meant sidearm, I hope. And so we talked firearms and chatted, and actually became friends. This NYPD detective. So I was able to glean some things from him over the years as far as writing.
Yeah, I had never heard that phrase, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think I read it in a Mickey Spillane novel or something, but
Hey, how's that rice going, you see?
exactly. You're packing heat.
You packing heat, Billy, huh? Come
Yeah,
over here. What are you, some
exactly.
wisecracker, huh?
Exactly.
Hey, speaking of that, of all the gigs, did you have a favorite of all those? I mean, what do you got? 30? How many years? Did I do the math? I did.
About 28 total. 29, almost
Yeah,
30.
that's close. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, did you have a favorite gig in all of that?
Well, as far as being a deputy marshal was a dream from the time I was a kid. And I mean, I was the type of guy that in the Cutter books, I'm sort of imbue Lola with my giddiness when I was a new deputy. I taped my business card to my government car so I could see my name by the badge, whenever I drive. And I mean, I was just eating up with it. And because in Texas, it's kind of like Texas Rangers, there's a lot of mystique, and the marshals have not as much as a ranger, but a certain amount of swagger and gravitas. And so when I was a young police officer, when the U.S. Marshals came into town to hunt a fugitive, it was like, you know, the gods coming down from Mount Olympus to hang out with us a while. It wasn't that way by the time I got aboard, but when I was young, it was certainly a lot of that. So I really looked forward to that. But when it comes to people and dealing with the public and really fodder for being a writer, there's nothing that beats uniform patrol. I mean, you're just in the thick of it all the time, and everybody you meet is unhappy, whether they're unhappy to see you or grateful that you're there, but unhappy about something else. And so you're constantly, you know, we we used to we this was in 1984, 85. We would come in from shift and all huddle together around the in the squad room as we were getting off shift and watch black and white reruns of Adam 12 and laugh. Just There's just a lot of that goes on. People think that it's all gunplay, but it's social work. So much of it.
Yeah.
You get to learn people, and that certainly translates into writing. And then I to give a super long answer to a very simple question. My favorite part was mounted patrol. I loved being on patrol on the horse, um, talking to people. Got in a foot pursuit one time on the horse after a shoplifter, and nothing more relaxing than chasing somebody when you're sitting on the back of a horse.
Nothing more relaxing than
For
chasing
me,
some.
not yeah,
Yeah.
for me, not the
Yeah.
not the bad guy.
Oh, the bad guy was probably not digging that at all.
He didn't
Yeah.
go far.
Now, on that same note, can you recall, and this is just the reporter in me, I suppose, the most dangerous moment, something that you were in the middle of and you thought, oh shit, I'm not sure I'm going to get out of this in one piece.
Yeah, several times I've had some pretty hellacious fights. I always when I would teach defensive tactics and or go talk to schools, I would always ask the kids or the people there how many have ever been in a fight, and even most, I wouldn't say most, but even many police officers that think they've been in a fight have actually only been in a violent struggle where the other person was trying to get away, and that's not a fight. A fight is when somebody turns back at you and says, "I'm going to kill you," and then get away. And
Yeah.
so a couple of those have been pretty intense. Not to get into telling a bunch of war stories, but just a couple of fights. And then I remember being we had a trooper that was kidnapped in Texas, and probably the most frightened. It takes a while to be scared. Most of the time when you're in it, if somebody's got a gun and you're going to guns yourself and all that, there's no time to you're really trying to just take care of your buddies beside you and say, help people, citizens, civilians. And but I think the most frightened I've ever been was this trooper was kidnapped during a stop. There was a little shootout. He ended up in a car. That car wrecked out. He flagged another car down. This was before cell phones were ubiquitous, and so when he finally was able to call us on a car phone, he was back in his car with or back in a civilian car, chasing his car on his cell phone, a bag phone. This had been in 80. 6 maybe.
Uh-huh.
Another gunfight. I'm quarter mile away, so I end up in the pursuit. This guy chasing his car, other troopers are. I'm a city kitty, if you will. I'm the baby of the group. I had about 2 years on, and I was in a Dodge Diplomat or a Plymouth Grand Fury. I can't remember. Same car, and I drove them both. I can't remember, but I remember I was on Interstate 20 heading towards Fort Worth, just floating like I was on a hovercraft all over the road. And um, my I was going fast enough that the dash mounted radar just started flashing, because the cars would go fast. They just had no control. And we had a trooper that was kidnapped. We didn't know what was going on. There was gunplay involved, and so everybody was just you know pedal to the metal.
Wide
And
open.
I think I was going probably about 130, 131. I think the car probably topped out then, all over the road. And I remember thinking, and back then we didn't wear seatbelts.
Oh,
That was not a thing that you did. In fact, we argued with the chief when he told us the law said we had to wear seatbelts. We're like, we'll kill ourselves getting out of the car. And I remember thinking, if I reach for my seatbelt, I might flip this car, but I got to get up there and save so and so. I could really die here today. So I definitely a seatbelt fan after that. Just pretty visceral fear.
no doubt. I mean, a buck 30 in and of itself is one thing, but then with the car that you have little control and you're in pursuit and you don't know what's at the other end of the pursuit.
Yeah.
Woo!
Luckily it was Sunday mid morning in Texas where everybody was at church. So I-20 was pretty um, vacant. And back then the troopers were driving these Mustang pursuit vehicles that would, do 140 plus, and they were like zipping past me. And of course, I might have been so scared. I was so scared I may have started to ease off, go down to a more respectable 110 for a while.
You were serving up your own kind of church, weren't you?
Yeah. There you
I
go.
got I got my own gospel and it's called
There
a
you go.
45. Well, I wonder if now on that same kind of a line of thinking, have you ever been in hairy situations like Arliss in Cold Snap? That because I mean this here's a guy who's just always seems to he's going after trouble, kind of always in and around trouble, and I'm just wondering, now Mark had to pull this from somewhere.
Yeah, Alaska is one of those places that you Alaska is a character in these books, and rightly so. When you're here for just a few, and I come from Texas, so it's. I mean, we have a T-shirt. I've been here 25 years, and got a T-shirt with a little tiny picture of Texas, and it says, "Pissing off Texas since 1959," with a giant Alaska beside it. But I'm from Texas, but Alaska has a way with the giant apex predators, and even apex prey like moose that'll stomp the pudding out of you. I'm way more fearful of moose. I've had moose get after me while I was serving warrants, with a calf in the city, just in the yard, come after us, and you forget about the guy possibly with a gun inside, and climb on a dumpster. So Alaska I've had that happen. We've been in the extreme cold. I've showed up out in Bush, Alaska, and the native folks out there would just look at what I was wearing and shake their heads and go get me some good stuff, and consequently though, because I'd gone out there as a young deputy, uh, when I was able to start going back to headquarters and kind of carrying some water for the district about Bush, Alaska, they got us some incredibly good gear. But just being out in the woods, we've had some times when I got frostbite on my big toe out looking for a guy one time, and things like that.
Yeah. And this is a question I had written down to ask myself, and it's kind of been going through my mind since I've been following you. I'm like, and I'm not trying to be a smartass, but I mean, why Alaska? What took you from Texas, which is its own world, to Alaska?
Yeah, that's a good question. Books took me to Alaska. So my aunt was a librarian the whole time I was growing up, and she would she lived in Salt Lake City, and so we would go, and my grandmother lived in Salt Lake, and we would go back and forth to the mountains, and I just loved the mountains. And then, but I read um, Farley Mowat books when I was quite young. There's a book called Two Against the North about uh, two teenage boys, like 14, 15, that get in a canoe wreck and end up in remote barren lands of Canada and have to spend the winter. And they have one gun, a little hatchet. It's kind of like a little older version of Gary Paulson's Hatchet. Um, then of course, as I got older, Hatchet didn't come along till a little bit later when I was older. But I read Farley Mowat, who's a very prolific Canadian writer, um, and other books about families that lived in the North. And when I was about 12, I no, maybe I guess younger than that, probably 10. I went in our backyard, and I had my own gun when I was 9. We had a family farm, and I couldn't take any friends hunting with me, but me and the gun and my dog would go out and wander around our farm and hunt rabbits for the table and dove and quail and whatnot. So I was pretty, and then my sister would come out with me when we got a little bit older, but um, so I was already outdoors in it. But I went to our backyard when I read this Farley Mowat book, and I found so I was pretty young, 10, and I found a cottonwood root, and I carved some Eskimo snow goggles to make sure I didn't go snow blind. And I'm sure my parents and all my friends thought I was a nut case because I'm in Texas and I'm wearing these wooden slit snow goggles, like I saw in National Geographic, But
Right.
I remember we went to the Texas, either the State Fair, or the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show, or one of those, and the Yukon, Canadian Yukon had a booth there, and they had maps. And usually when you see a map of the Yukon, it's Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Alaska all chunked into one. And I
Right.
remember sitting on the floor when I was in probably the 6th or 7th grade with my mom and just planning, I'm going to go up there someday. This is because it's wild. It's wild. I knew I wanted to be a policeman. At that time, I thought maybe I'd be an RCMP. I really didn't. Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I didn't understand borders that well, but ended up marrying a girl from Canada, so it was really easy to
Yeah.
come this way.
Yeah. And your life seems to be such a great reflection of your work. And the more I'm around heavy hitter authors like yourself, the more I'm aware of what the phrase "write what you know" is about. When I first heard that phrase a couple of years back, I was like, well, what does that mean? And why wouldn't you write about stuff you didn't know? Because isn't that what having a great imagination's all about? And then as I have followed careers such as yourself, I go, oh, yeah, of course, because back to an earlier comment we made, you are referencing and you're stacking upon what you have already spent your life working on. So it certainly helps to feed your fictional work with this background. And I asked this of Don Bentley, also a Tom Clancy Jack Reacher writer, and I go, and I having never done this, I ask, and perhaps, hopefully, you can help me understand this. How does one go about getting into the mindset and the mindset and the voice, which is very specific in writing, and writing as another person,
You
referencing
know,
your Tom Clancy work?
yeah. So I was a Tom Clancy fan for years anyway. I can pretty much track my early law enforcement career by what Clancy was coming out at the time. For instance, flying to that the United Nations thing I mentioned, the General Assembly. I was reading Sum of All Fears, and I left the book on the plane and had to buy it again. So I remember I bought it twice. Um, when I was in the police academy, Hunt for Red October came out. So I've been a fan. And as I sort of got those characters inside me and knew them from a long time ago as a, fan. So I consider what I write kind of fan fiction. I try to, now I told Tom Colgan, he's an incredible editor, with Penguin Random House that handles the Clancy uh, franchise for the estate. And we had this chat early on, and I was just terrified. I was just scared to death. In fact, it really kind of put me to my knees a little bit on the beach where I was when they called about it, because I had no idea it was coming.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, you don't really politic for that sort of thing. That Mark Graney recommended me to Tom, and showed him one of the book I was working on, and so my agent called and um, offered the gig. And but I called Tom, and again I was very scared because I was such a Clancy fan, and I we came to a conclusion that really calmed me. And he said, "You don't need to write Tom Clancy. You need to write a Mark Cameron book in the spirit of Tom Clancy." So just as the director of a movie might cast Alec Baldwin or Harrison Ford or Ben Affleck as Jack Ryan or John Krasinski, I cast my own character that's true to what I see, what Clancy had. And I've been asked this before, but I actually cast in my brain when I write Jack Ryan, I see Tim Daly, the
Yeah.
husband on Madam Secretary, that very smart, um, kind of professorial good guy,
Yeah.
smartest guy in the room everywhere with his moral code that's just unbendable. So, but I would go back really quick and speak to something you said about writing what you know. I think what makes that more important is that you don't write what you don't know. In other words, when I do and Don, I've talked to Don Bentley about this, and Mark Graney, and a bunch of other writers. When we write, and we do a ton of research, travel and whatnot, I might have 5 legal pads full of research when I come back from Argentina or Japan or San Antonio in the last book, or for one of the cutters, out going out to the bush. Very little of it makes it into the book. But if I'm going to write about the Alaska Railroad, for instance, I can't put the wrong number of cars in. It's better I don't put anything. So when you're writing about police work, it's better to not make crap up. It's better to find out, because it's you can get away with leaving something out, but boy, you put something in that's wrong. And especially in the Clancy's, I think Clancy readers read with a TI-80 graphing calculator and check all my work while I'm writing.
It is true, man. Hardcore. It's kind of like if you're reading Jack Carr. There's another one. If you're reading,
Yeah.
if he references a gun, you can take it to the bank that he knows exactly what he's talking about.
No, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I try to make that with fights and firearms, and then of course law enforcement when I write. But you get to write, and then I got an email from a nuclear physicist a while back that liked the books, but he corrected me on the half-life of some plutonium isotope. And I said, dude, I'm just happy a nuclear physicist is reading my books.
That's good. That's real good. Um, I was reading about your friendship with, I think his name is Steve Zemansky, and was
Mhm.
wondering if I were to eavesdrop on a conversation between you two. I always love stuff like this. And
Mhm.
what would I learn as it pertains to bringing an aircraft down? Because when I saw that phrase, I'm like, well, you just point down. I mean, and then I'm
Mhm.
like, no, no,
Mhm.
no, he means bringing it down. But what would
Yeah.
that?
So without, and a lot of times I will leave tiny bits and pieces of the recipe out because I don't want to, give a terrorist to throw a terrorist a bone.
Sure.
But I went to Steve. He's a good friend of mine. His wife's a very good writer, but he worked on our Marshal Service airplane for years. He's promoted now within the government, but worked on the Marshal Service plane. And so I would see him when we were going out to the bush or flying out, somewhere in our aircraft. And so I would pick his brain. And I had this particular issue I was working on with one of the Jericho Quinn books, where I wanted them to be flying, already in the air, and I wanted the bad guys to have already sabotaged the plane so that they would be over a remote area, and then it would go down after the fact. So not a hostile takeover or whatever. And so I was amazed at how quickly he goes, "Oh, well, you just crimp the oil line, and that'll show power. That'll still show pressure, and then it'll overheat, and pretty soon your engine burns up, and you all die." And I'm like, "Awesome! That's exactly what I need." So he knows. It's one of those things. He knows what he knows, and he can help me out, and then I can put in enough that somebody that knows that goes, "Oh, he knows what he's talking about," but not enough that, or that a layman can look at it and go, "Oh, wow, that could really work, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
We'll be right back after this message from our new sponsor. Man, do I like coffee. And as much as I don't want to sound like a bean snob, I am. There, I said it. I mean, once you've tried fresh roasted coffee, why would you settle for anything else, right? That's why I'm happy to announce a new sponsor to the Thriller Zone, Writer's Block Coffee. Why Writer's Block Coffee? Here's why. Super easy. Their coffee is naturally processed, which means the way the coffee cherries are harvested uses much less water than the big brands. That benefits the environment and the economic and political stability of the places coffee's grown, such as Ethiopia, which is where they make their flagship Writer's Block coffee. Also, their coffee is specialty grade, which scores in the 80s on a scale of 1 to 100. That means the beans are in the top 5% of the world in terms of quality. Woo. I love this. They donate a percentage of their profits to an organization called First Book. It's a nonprofit that supports literacy with kids. It's a great cause that helps build the next generation of readers. And perhaps my favorite, their coffee is roasted to order. That means the beans do not sit on a shelf, but are roasted and shipped only after you order. Might take a little bit longer, but I'll tell you something, you're going to smell the difference the minute you open your mailbox. And here is the winning round. Here's the tasty bonus. Order today and get 15% off your first order with the code The Thriller Zone. Try Writer's Block coffee and taste the difference of roasted to order.
You're listening to The Thriller Zone. And now back to the show.
Guys with expertise really do help things come alive, especially when you, because it's one thing to go pick up a book and research, okay, how to crimp a line, but it's different when a guy goes, oh, no, I got my hands in the belly of that beast all the time, so I know exactly what to do.
No, exactly. I do the same thing with dear friend Ty Cunningham, who's a martial artist and my martial arts sensei and a tracker. And when I'm a second degree in jiu-jitsu and been in plenty of fights, but there's many times when I'll say, I've never been in a fight in an elevator. I'm going to call Ty, and then we'll hammer out. And fortunately, I don't think he's been in a fight in an elevator either, but he's been in more than I have. And so we'll hammer out the dynamics, the strategy and dynamics. And more important than that in a book, how to write it. Because just like dialogue, you're a writer, you know that dialogue isn't a script of real speech. It's a suggestion of it. And a fight scene in a book is the same way. If you wrote blow by blow and strike block by block,
yeah,
the reader would just skip over it.
Which makes me think of that. I guess it would be the closing scene, the fight that takes place in that cabin. The way you crafted that scene, God, I was like, man, that's the way I like to read a scene. You got a gun. This guy's chained up. This guy's reaching for the gun. This gal over here's got the hatchet. And, I didn't need a step-by-step play-by-play because my mind, as you can imagine as being a good writer, I'm in that room, I'm watching the melee happen. And God, those are the best scenes ever.
I appreciate it. The really important thing and it takes a long time to write, as you probably know, it takes a long time to write a page and a half of violence, because you have to stick to the point of view. You can't pop into somebody's head here and pop into somebody. And I always think of violence in a book like a car wreck. So you're only able to see what's rolling past your window every rotation or spinning around. And so you just have to trust the reader to fill in the blanks. And that's the big thing, I think.
I was going to say, trust the reader to fill in the blanks. Yeah. I think early on, and we probably all make this mistake. Hey, he said, she said, he said, he looked, she picked up, and there's so much of that I just go, oh, give me some credit,
Oh, exactly. My wife has a Dr. Seuss saying when she's looking at my stuff, that's kind of my warning. She'll say, do you like my hat? No, I do not like your hat. Goodbye. And I'm like, oh, okay. I see what's going on here. Exit.
Yeah, that is so good. And our minds would probably go back to Elmore Leonard, what does he say? Leave out the stuff that bores
Skip
people.
over. Yeah,
Yeah, the
skip
people.
over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 That's such
Pretty
good advice, isn't
pretty
it?
amazing. Well, you don't have to, we just want to, like I say, it's a suggestion of real dialogue, and it always turns me off in a movie or in a book when it's, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. That's 3 lines you just never had to put in there. They said, hey, said
Yeah,
hello.
yeah. Mark said hello. David looked at him like he had just sat on something. I love those things. It's what is
Right, right,
that?
right.
Show me, don't tell me. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. It's way more fun to see stuff, you don't, and I try to, well, Elmore Leonard was a good one for just, I mean, he didn't use adverbs very much at all. He would say he never did, but I can find one or two, but
yeah,
he hardly ever used an adverb. Um, and really a reader's okay with just he said, she said, but I like, little tricks, like if somebody touches their face or head, it means they're thinking. So you don't have to say, I don't need to go in, what am I going to do here? He thought. You can just say, he put his hand on his head. What am I going to do here? That's it.
right.
Little tricks like that you really learn from reading. Very few classes will line that out. You just read it and say, oh, look at what Ken Follett did here. Make a note.
Um, Alma Katsu is going to be on the show on Monday, and she and I were chatting this week, and she made a great point, and it has to do with reading and talking about reading a wide spectrum of material. In other words, don't read just thrillers. And we've all heard that, but for some reason, the way she said it, it took me out of the scene, and I went, that's a really good point, because if you're always in the same genre constantly, there's a little bit of, well, we're all doing the same thing. But if you go to a different genre, and I'm not saying go to cozy romance, but I'm saying read other writers, you do pick up organically, automatically, subconsciously a lot of things that you wouldn't ordinarily. Does that make sense?
I think that's crucial. I read my friends, but I don't read them while I'm writing. Like, I'm fortunate that I have a couple of different kinds of series. And so when I'm writing a mystery or an adventure story like Cutter, I don't read a CJ Box. When I'm writing a Clancy or a Jericho Quinn, I don't read a Mark Graney, or a Don Bentley, or a Simon Gervais. I read CJ Box because I don't want to get derivative, and it's
Right.
so easy to get derivative. But even then, I read thrillers growing up. I don't read them so much now because it's it's not up to us to write a political thriller. It's up to us to write characters that do these things in this particular setting, and the publishers and the bookstores put it in the political thriller. So really we're writing a story about people. And I I read, or I watched years ago, there was a book called The Bridges of Madison County,
Yeah.
um, by something Robert James Waller. I may get his name wrong, but I think his
Yep.
name's Waller. um, Really thin book, very much of a girl, quote unquote, chick read. I say
Yeah.
that, knowing that make people mad, but back then, that's what I thought of it. I was a brand new deputy, and my wife, who's this really sweet church going mom, I walked in the door from work. I was a brand new deputy, and she's chewing on the collar of her t-shirt, bawling her head off. And I thought, well, what's wrong? She goes, she's not going to leave her husband and go with a guy. And I thought, well, that seems like a good thing to me. Kind of blew it off, went about my business, was going down to the clerk's office in the federal building, taking some paperwork down, and it was lunchtime. So I unlocked the door, went in, and one of the clerks was there chewing on her blouse, crying, reading this book. I said, I'm going to go read that. If this book has that much effect on these people, then I need to go see what it's all about. And super well written book, not my cup of tea, but super well written book.
Yeah.
I think it's that way about I read science fiction and fantasy, and I read mostly, honestly, I read mostly nonfiction. I read um, everything Eric Larson writes because I love that he sends me to the dictionary, like Splendid in the Vile, and historical books. Um, nonfiction.
Yeah.
I think it's important to be learning all the time. And if I sat and just read thrillers,
Yeah.
it would just be a giant echo chamber, and that's that.
That's a really good point, Mark. And here's something else. I was talking to my wife the other day, and because of this show, I'm reading no less than 2 books a week.
Wow. Good
Um,
on you.
well, yeah, I don't know that I can keep that up and write my own work and do the podcast and. But my point is this: sometimes when I get on a real streak of some darkness, I do find myself going, I need a little break from the darkness, you know?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to go back, to use your reference earlier. I need to pick up a little Cat in the Hat and just
Yeah.
go play with the grandkids and go, that's a nice hat. Do you like my hat? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah. No, exactly. I'll do that with TV because I don't watch much television, but
Yeah.
I'll go take a break and watch my wife and I, this is embarrassing, but we have one grandson that lives up here, and we like encourage him to watch Bluey, this little show about a Australian blue heeler, which we've had many over the years. This little cartoon called Bluey. It's just so uplifting, and it takes, go watch Bluey if you wanted to. I don't own any stock in it, but that solves the darkness. I keep a copy. It's probably in the other room, but I keep a copy of A River Runs Through It on my desk,
Yeah.
and it's what I use when I get a book from somebody that says, "Could you please blurb this?" or whatever. Give me a quote. And it's not, the book might not be particularly skillfully written, and I need to sort of scrub my brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will read, or when I write something crappy and I read over it and think, man, I got to fix this, I'll read A River Runs Through It, and it's like salve. It's
Yeah.
incredibly soothing.
It's funny. I wrote a book a summer or two ago. I think it was last summer, called Devour, and it's probably it's easily the darkest thing I've ever written. And I don't know what it was. My wife and I were taking a road trip, and an idea popped into my head, and I just ran with it for my 14-hour drive. So when I got home, I banged it out, and it's super dark. And then here's the point. Then the following Christmas, for some reason, my mother was still alive, so no, it was a couple of Christmases ago. I sat down. I just wanted to write a really sweet little Christmas story. Had never done it. Just wanted to see if I could do it. I got more rave reviews from that, and at the end of it, I thought, it felt really good to write that. I didn't even publish it. It's just I printed it out just for family, and I handed it out. And to the same point, I often think about going back and doing that. I think it's almost a cathartic cleansing to devour, to read books like that and just kind of cleanse your soul. Yeah.
No, I agree, and I anybody that reads my books know that. For my dad's passed away, but anybody that reads my books knows that, and has heard me talk, knows that for years my mother read my books to my dad out loud because he was blind, and so I did a lot of backspacing when I'm writing these horribly violent books. Like, I don't want my mom to read that. Mostly it had to do with language, because she was okay with the brutal people killing terrorism stuff.
Yeah.
But even with that, I'm the kind of guy that when I write a horribly dark section of the book, the good guys win. Now, there might be some good guys that get terribly hurt or even die along the way, but in the end, good prevails. And that's the only way I can get by. If I was writing A Clockwork Orange or something like that, I would not be able to sleep at night.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, this is a good place to ask this question. It's very obvious you've been at this a while. You've got a prolific entourage of books to your credit. If you could go back and give your younger self a single piece of advice, this is life stuff. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell the young Mark?
I'd tell, I think I'd tell the young Mark the same thing I tell young, or not young, but beginning writers or even established writers. Don't read your reviews. They matter not. It doesn't matter if they're all 5-star. It's like knowing your own IQ. If you know you're super smart, you don't need anybody to tell you, and it just, it puffs you up. And if this test says you're dumb, then you're inclined to believe it. And reviews are, I read the like Publishers Weekly, the industry reviews, but
Sure.
Amazon, and I love it when people give me Amazon reviews. I check to see how many I got and that they're coming in, because that's sort of a litmus test that people are still reading the book.
Sure.
But and sometimes Vicky, my wife, will say, "You got a really funny review, like, damn you, Mark Cameron, you left a cliffhanger again." Things like that. But it just, I see people, and I don't want to speak, I don't mean bad about this to other writers, but I think it's not a good habit to always point out what great reviews we're getting, or revel in them like Scrooge McDuck with all his gold. Here, I got these 5-star reviews, because I could get 5 stars, 105 star. I remember when I wrote the first Jericho, it got very nice reviews, and I was reading them back then. Got really nice reviews for about 90 reviews, and they came in fast, because in 2011 there weren't as many books on Amazon, and so people were reading my little thriller. Mark Graney only had 1 book out at the time, maybe 2 of his own, and he was starting the Clancy's. And then I thought, oh, these are great. People love me. And then somebody wrote a scathing 1 star, and it gutted me for like a week.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, why does this guy hate me so bad? I don't know him. Why would he be so mean?
Yeah.
And over the years, I finally realized, this is dumb. You're just wasting a lot of time reading reviews.
Well, not only is it feeds something in your psyche that doesn't really need to be fed.
Right, one way or the other.
One way or the other.
I mean, you think about. I would like to think that Robert Ludlum and the greats, or Ken Follett, or some of them are still alive, some have passed away, but the people that I read, I would like to think that they would just write their books. And I mean, I personally, I'm glad. I love to chat with people like you about writing. When I think about this being on social media, I cringe. I'm more of a private person. I like talking. I have to psych myself up and saying, "Oh, I'm just talking here writing," because I'm not much of a social media. I do it because I need to.
Yeah.
And but then people will come up, and it's really, I'm gonna get hammered for saying this, but it's really kind of false. People will come up to me at book signings and they'll go, "Hey, Mark, what are you doing?" I go, I'm doing well." And they look at me like I should know them. And I go, "Okay." And they say, it's Jack." "Okay. Hey, Jack. We talked 3 weeks ago for a long time." "I don't remember that, Jack." On Facebook. I'm like, "Okay, I guess I just don't remember that at all. I don't remember that." "Okay, yeah, I remember that interaction. That was cool. That was great." And then we actually develop a relationship right there, but there wasn't a relationship before. It was a couple of conversation bubbles on a screen. So here endeth the rant. I'm just not that way. I think it's from 30 years of law enforcement and being very private and not talking about much. It's really hard for me to get out and blab about myself and my books. So I'd much rather talk about writing than, "Here, look at my cool 5-star Publishers Weekly review." But I send them out. I'm gutted every time I do it, but I do.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll take some of that heat off of you, and we'll just keep, it is funny though. Early on, I heard agents talk about, you have to have, what do they call it? Oh, you got to have a platform. And if you don't have a platform, agents won't take you. And then I kind of bought into that for a while. And then I thought, I'm just going to write the best damn book I can. And if it gets into the right hands, then that's the way it's supposed to be. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, but I have a very sincere mantra in that I dream it, I chase it, and I release it. Meaning, if it's supposed to be, it will, and if it's not, then it won't. But not to be
right. No, that's good. No, I think that's absolutely right. And there is I don't mean to come off as saying that there's no need for social media, because in this day and age, there is a need. I mean, I just got on Twitter a year ago. I
Yeah.
went into it kicking and screaming. Um, I've been on Facebook a long time, but I use Facebook mostly to, people that I have to put out stuff now because the book's coming out. But mostly I talk about Alaska and my grandkids,
Yeah.
and hopefully give a little National Geographic kind of look, or maybe a homestead kind of look to my readers to say, okay, this is what's going on in the background. Because I'm human like everybody else, and if I post something, I want to get interaction and likes and whatnot, and I'll go and check my interactions when I should be writing. So it's a hole you don't want to fall down if you want to write.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I'm not a Facebook fan because I find it just gobbles too much of my time. We're also having a little bit of a spotty reception, so I'm going to keep moving on the off chance that I don't want to lose you because, man, I got so much yet to. I mean, I'm going to kind of start wrapping it up here, but I want to make sure
No worries.
okay. Now, I do. I wanted to mention this, and I meant to mention it early on. Cold Snap, by the way, the book we're talking to here is your sense of cold was kind of ridiculous, and I'm going to overstate. I'm being a little bit silly here, but I had to practically wear a sweater when I was reading this book, and I think it's probably because I hate cold weather so much, which is why I asked you early on, why the hell Alaska, Mark? But you're you and I'm me. And sometimes I get tired of the constant sunshine in San Diego, but your sense of cold was so viscerally real. I was all in. That's what I'm trying to say.
I appreciate that. There's nothing like, remember the Jack London story, To Build a Fire? You remember that story?
No.
I don't know if he's a trapper or what, but he's out with his dog, and he's lost all his gear, and he's freezing cold. And there's something about, there's cold, there's uncomfortable cold, and then there's, when it gets below, say 20 below, then you just can't, when you're out there, it's hard to keep enough clothes on, and it just seeps through everything. And 40 below, and stuff starts to break, and if you touch something metal, you get a blister on your hands. And and the coldest I've ever been is, we think, about 56 below. The Fairbanks bank sign said 56 below, and we were out in the woods away, so who knows, maybe it was colder, but super still, super cold. We had vehicles with us. We were at a cabin, we were doing some training for tracking, and it was so cold that we were worried about our batteries freezing up, and we were in the woods, so there's no place to plug in the car. Like, if your son's in Fairbanks, it's, you got to plug in your car at the grocery store in the winter. And so we would just, drink a glass of water or lemonade or tea or whatever, a real big jug of that, and then go to sleep, knowing that we're going to wake up in 30 minutes to pee. And then we'd start our cars with an auto start, and then drink a bunch more water, and then go back to sleep. And then the auto start run for 15 minutes. And just did that all night long because we were afraid we'd get stranded out there. So you learn about the cold, and it's much easier to write about it. Now, the cool thing about writing these winter stories in Alaska,
I see what you did there.
Many of those are written in, I see what I did there. Probably about half of those are written in the South Pacific on an island where my wife and I go. So I'm sitting in the sun writing about the cold, but it's I remember it vividly.
I think the coldest I've been, and this is when I knew it was time to hang up my microphone in Chicago. I had a radio show in Chicago, and it was a winter that had hit 33 below, and I was going to work at 4:30 in the morning. So, you're scraping the car, and you're trying to warm it up to get to the office. And I remember thinking, when I lost that job, I'm like, you know what? There's my sign. I'm out of this. And I went to LA, and the rest is history. But
no, you're right. There's something about cold, and I hope it comes across in the book, that's way more mental than it is physical. And I think the temperature that I was coldest was that time I just told you about, but the coldest I've ever felt was about maybe 15 or 20 below, snow caving with my oldest son when he was about 9. Now, what kind of a dad takes their son out at 9 and digs a hole in the snow and sleeps in it? But we were adventurous. I was young, he was young. We were more
Yeah.
like buddies than father and son sometimes. And I had my head out of the snow cave trying to light a little camp stove to cook some oatmeal. So our legs were inside and he was huddled down, and we weren't far from the house. We were like on the back of the property,
Yeah.
but I was really worried about him. It was super cold. I couldn't even hold the matches because
Yeah.
of it was like to build a fire. I couldn't. You need to go back and read that if you want to read about the cold. I couldn't even get the matches, and I remember being so cold and so worried about my son that I took some of the fuel and I sloshed it on top of the stove. Well, that's not a really smart thing to do. And so then I was finally able to get a spark from one of the matches, and the whole stove just went up like a rocket. And fortunately for me, it didn't blow up in my face. It burned like the tail end of a jet for a while, and then
Yeah.
settled down. And I was able to reach over and turn it on. Just that crazy mindset of not thinking clearly is what I think you have to put that in a book about cold to make it work, rather than just shivering, teeth chatter, and cold
Yeah.
hands.
Well, when I got to that part where when they were digging the snow cave, I'm like, what in the hell is he doing? And that didn't sound a whole lot of fun. And here's a random question, and this was one of those things when I read it, I went, oh, I wonder if that's really true. So I'm going to ask Mark, is it true that wolves will often eat the belly of its prey while they're still alive?
No, yeah, wolves will run. It's another thing about the internet. There's all these so spiritual, and I like wolves. Don't get me wrong, but they're wolves, and there's the pictures of the pack of wolves, and they say the oldest are in front so they don't get left behind, and these are the alphas and all that. That's a pack of malarkey. If a wolf gets weak in a wolf pack, they eat it. It's certainly um, the law of tooth and fang out there, and they're starving to death. Not too many years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we had a super cold snap come through early before there was a bunch of snow, and so the the wolves chase their prey by following them through the snow, and they'll pull at their flank. Sometimes they'll get up beside them and bite their tongues off so they bleed to death. They're just they're not thinking critically. They're using instinct and bringing down something to eat. And
Yeah.
if there's no snow, they can't catch up as easily to these moose and caribou and big animals that are their prey that sustain them through the cold. And so they start to starve. And so without any snow to slow down the moose, the wolves came into town and started eating dogs. And we lost on that, not us personally, but Eagle River, the little town that I live in or near, had 7 dogs snatched, right? Some of them right out of their, like walking down the trail with their masters, just eaten up. And when I
Wow.
say eaten, I mean, you read an article in the paper and say, and there was a bunch of movement in the bush, and we went over and there was a collar left or an ear. So it's Alaska is brutal, and wolves are um, trying to make a living out here, and it's a hard place to make a living, and they will absolutely do that.
Oh, man. Well, we're going to start to wrap it up. And before I get to rapid fire questions, I have this one question I like to ask writers such as yourself. And it has to do with the best piece of advice you'd offer my listeners who are either considering becoming a writer or maybe in the midst of launching a career. Do you have that single piece of wisdom from on high?
Yeah, it's kind of touches on what I said before. And my wisdom, such as it is just what I do. And what I do is I read with a pencil. I find books that I really like, and I read critically. And I don't mean like I'm critiquing the book. I read it like I'm studying it. So if I have for instance, a copy of Ken Follett's Man from St. Petersburg, it's highlighted and marked. And here's the first. I might go into a bookstore and not buy any books, but I'll read the first sentence of 50 just to see, okay, here's a line, especially in this day and age when everybody's playing video games or reading on their phones. If you don't hook them by the first paragraph and really the first sentence or two, you've lost them. And I wrote several stories for Boys Life magazine, the Boy Scout magazine, and the editor and I would kind of joke back and forth. If you don't hook them on the first, these are 13, 14, 15-year-old boys. And if you don't hook them on the first sentence, and the first sentence has to be about death or poop, or they won't even read, So I would just say read with a pencil and really study what you're reading and read voraciously. And then don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just write.
Yeah. That's I agree with both pieces. And the second part there is, I think we're sometimes so, especially with this huge competition we're all facing, because everybody thinks they've got a book in them. I say, you know what, just throw it out there. Give it your best shot. And if that one doesn't work, do it again. And if you're willing to do it again and again and again and again, then that's really what you're going to do. And you're going to get better automatically. You're going to put in your 10,000 hours, right?
That's true.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. And of course, it is time for rapid fire questions. The first one's super easy. Plotter or pantser, and why?
Oh, plotter. I'm not smart enough to be a pantser. In fact, I have a theory that people that say they're pantsers are lying, and they're just super smart and plot it all in their head and then spew it out.
Nice. All right. Music or silence when you write?
Silence.
Yeah. I am curious though, subnote, what do you listen to when maybe you're driving along the back roads or you're just chilling out? What's kind of music does Mark Cameron listen to?
I like country, like older country, like George Strait.
Charlie Pride.
And then super old. Yeah. Charlie Pride and Johnny Cash. And I like that.
The classics. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What are the two things you are never without, and you can't use cell phone on this?
Something to make fire, a light, and a pocket knife all the time. In fact, I challenge all the youth around here, the Boy Scouts, my kids' friends, kids at church. They can come up to me anywhere except in the airport. Used to, they could do it in the airport because I had a badge and carried it everywhere. Sure. But they can challenge me and come up and say, have you got your EDC, your everyday carry? And I have to produce a pocket knife, the small light, and my little Zippo lighter, which is orange, by the way. It's not tactical. I used to have a really cool tactical green one, and then another tactical green one, and then another tactical green one. And they're somewhere out in Bush, Alaska, where I set them down and couldn't find them in the dark. So yeah. So always those three things. It's cool you asked that, because
he's reaching for it now.
I have my lighter with me right now.
There it is, an orange Zippo, and you said some kind of a light, right? So
yeah, I have a very small light. I have a very small. It's kind of embarrassing. So I have a little light. I can't remember who makes this one. Streamlight, maybe. It's very bright, but it's just a 3A. And then I'm actually also never without a pencil sharpener, because I write a lot with pencil, and then something to save my work. And
look at you.
And then a knife.
And then the knife. There it is. Oh, bam.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
not legal in all states, but
well, it's legal where you are.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, you and a pal are flying over the frozen tundra of, let's say, Alaska, when suddenly he passes out for some reason. He's still alive, but he's passed out. You don't know it. And you have to land the plane safely. Now, however, because you're over unknown territory and not 100% sure which is land and which could be a frozen lake, and a thunderstorm looms on the horizon, what does Mark Cameron do?
After fervent prayer, or I should say during prayer, you know that the pilots have a saying: you aviate, navigate, then communicate. So you got to fly the plane first. So I'm a big believer in saying a prayer, but I'm going to be trying to fly the plane before I do it. Now, as a young kid that wanted to be James Bond someday, I took flying lessons. I never became a pilot, but I have about 19 hours of flying, so I could get that plane on the ground in one singular giant fireball. It would be all together when I crashed it. I would just assess the situation and fly the plane. I would want to save my friend, but not going to save him much if I'm doing CPR while we auger into the mountains.
Yeah,
But,
no.
but try all the way to the ground. That's what I would say. I probably wouldn't be able to do it, but I'd sure try my best.
That should almost be a t-shirt. Try all the way until you get put into the ground.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate. I wasn't there to listen to it, but I was in Alaska when it happened. And there was a young pilot, one of the charter services down in Southeast Alaska, and he was flying in I can't remember, a little Navajo or something, a little single engine 6-person Piper, and his engine blew, and his windscreen got completely covered up with oil. And so he's flying along, and he's using instruments, but he's a newer pilot. He's got a bunch of passengers in the back, and this is a small plane. So when you fly with a plane that small, if you're a passenger in the back and the pilot panics, you can smell his urine. I mean, it's you're close. And so he's on the radio. He's talking to control. They're trying to find a place to land, but he's in the mountains and over water. I mean, Southeast Alaska is just a series of trees and rocks and waves. In the tape, you hear him talking. He's getting more and more agitated, more and more nervous, and then he gets very calm and he says, "Tell my mom I love her." And that's like, all right, he's given up. And this Coast Guard helicopter pilot appeared off his wing and talked to him, calmed him down, chatted with him. I mean, this guy is a hero. He is an incredible dude. And he said, "I've got you a patch of beach." And I'm paraphrasing here. Basically, he pointed him towards a patch of beach and said, "All right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to slip that plane sideways so you get a look out the window. And then you'll fly it down, slipping sideways. And then right when you get to the ground, straighten up and you'll be fine." And he talked him through it as if he was like a automatic pilot. And so, and we flew over that spot later in our plane and looked at the place where that young pilot, who, and I don't want to take away from the pilot, incredibly skillful what he did, along with the help of that Coast Guard helicopter pilot. Pretty cool story. So hopefully I wouldn't panic so much. Hopefully I would think of that and say, all right, maybe there'll be a helicopter pilot come here and talk me down.
Man, that's a fantastic story. And I had just enough training myself. I'm about 10, 12 hours in. And it was years and years ago, but if you can just let it do its natural gravity and make sure the tail touches first, gravity will just do everything else. People always think, "Oh my gosh, if I go down like this, I'm gonna kill myself." No, just let the back touch, and it will automatically just drop. And fifth and final, Hollywood has just bought your entire Arliss Cutter series. Congratulations, man! You're buying the first round, and wants to turn it into a streaming series. Mark, now this is a 3-part question. I'm going to break it down real easy. Who would you like to see play Arliss if you could have any say in it?
We've talked about this quite a bit. There's, this kind of stuff is in the works all the time with these sorts of books. So I've been chatting with producers for years. You know how Hollywood is. We talk about that all the time. So we've looked at, the big name writers, Chris Pratt, who now is playing in Jack Carr's series. Yeah. And I actually think a lot more about Lola and wanting to have a real Polynesian woman play Lola. So yeah. Not that you touched a nerve, but we've been talking about this really hard over the last few months. So
yeah. And it's funny, something just popped into my head when you were talking about, when you said that, what the viewers are interested in. I know that when Tom Cruise was playing Jack Reacher, everyone was like, but he doesn't fit the thing. And then this new guy comes in, and I'd love to impress you by knowing his name, and I don't recall it, but he comes in and plays Jack Reacher, and you're like, you instantly buy it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's a Reacher. Yeah, exactly. That's what you want. Somebody that, I describe Cutter as being 6'3", 240.
Yeah.
I've known some Cutters in my life, and
I bet.
It's there's a line in the book. We kind of joke all the time because there's a line in the book where he's getting his armed boarding pass. It's not in this book. I think it's in two books, maybe Stone Cross or Open Carry. He's in the Anchorage airport. When you're in the Marshal Service, the badge is on the outside. And so you just show them your badge. They look at the inside and then they fill out some paperwork and you can get on the airplane with your firearm. And the flight attendant, the gate agent is kind of flirting with Cutter. And she says, Marshals, that's like, and these are conversations I've had my whole career.
Uh-huh.
Like, Marshals, you don't look like Tim Oliphant, like on Justified. And Cutter kind of smiles at her and says, I'm not trying to be Tim Oliphant. Tim Oliphant's trying to be me. And so we joked about what if, because Josh Duhamel is always getting confused with Tim Oliphant and the Marshal in Justified. So kind of joked about getting him to play Cutter, but I think there's too much baggage going along with that.
Yeah.
With an incredible show like Justified.
Hey, here's part B. Would you like to play a cameo role in this aforementioned series? And if so, what would it be?
Oh, man on street, man at bus stop. It'd be fun. My wife wants to play a cameo role, but people always say, "Are you Cutter? Was that you? During your career?" I said, "No. If you watch me on social media, I'm grumpy. There's no doubt that I'm the grumpy character with my grandkids." But
yeah, you'd be you want to be Alfred Hitchcock stepping on the bus and fill in the blank. Yeah.
Or crazy bearded dude in the Alaska bush.
And the last one, what's the one thing you see Hollywood continue to get wrong all the time, but never seems to change it? And I've had a similar conversation with some other writers.
I think the thing that always chuckles me is the way guns make a noise like the slides being racked when somebody draws them or points them. Like, I didn't do anything to that gun, but that's the Foley editor adding sound because the director said we need a gun sound right there. So I get why they're doing it. It's such a visual medium, but guns don't rattle like that, or I wouldn't carry them around.
Yeah, if they did rattle, you'd go, I'm going to trade this in, boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, one more last thing before we wrap, and I have to mention this because, and this is going to be interesting to you. I learned about you. It could be interesting, could be a little bit embarrassing. I learned about you when I was researching, and this is going to sound like a commercial because I'll probably turn it into one, but I was researching a company when I was setting up to be a writer. I'm like, if I'm going to play with the big boys and I'm going to look like one of the big boys, then I can't keep doing websites myself because A, it takes forever, and B, it's getting hacked and blah, blah, blah. So you were the very first person. I don't even know how this happened, but I went to authorbytes.com.
They're great. They're awesome.
Yeah, and I saw you first, and that was an example that popped up. And then as I inquired about it, they said, oh, if you like Mark Cameron, check out these. And I checked out Mark Graney, Brad Taylor, and Don Bentley.
And Simon Gervais. Yeah,
and
all those.
Simon,
Mm-hmm.
And by then, I was hook, line, and sinker because it had the look and the style that I wanted. So I think it's interesting that I discovered you via your website way before I discovered your books.
No, that's really cool to hear because I sing their praises all the time. They know you can put together a really good website, but knowing what readers need, what you really need is a novelist. So I'm happy to pay them. They earn their money with the way they put it together, and they're constantly looking at what kind of feedback and okay, we need to optimize this for phones because that's where people are looking at your website. And yeah, I can't say enough good about Author Bytes.
Yeah.
It does sound like a commercial. We're receiving no pay or discount on this, but I can't say enough good about them.
Well, actually, neither you or I are actually directly getting anything, but because, and you're going to love this, they're now a sponsor of the show.
Well, I'm glad. I mean, I'm not. I hope you do, but I'm not getting anything.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were going to bring this up. That's my disclaimer. But
no,
they're awesome.
And the only reason I'm bringing it up is because as I'm researching your books, I'm going, oh, that's right. I found this website like almost 2 years ago because there's a very specific layout. But anyway, so Author Bytes liked my talking about it so much. They said, we want to sponsor you. So
that's cool.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that's good because it does two things. It, helps, well, three things. It helps your show, it helps them, but as a writer, more important to me, it sends other writers, and it makes a world of difference when you have a professional landing page when people are looking for you. It certainly does.
100%. And these days, with hacking the way it is, these guys
Oh
stay
yeah.
on top of it. And I've been hacked before. And so here for the last plug. Anybody who listens to this today and says, "Hey, maybe I'll do like Mark and Dave are doing," they're going to give you 3 months free when you sign a 1-year contract. So,
Very worth it. Totally
boom.
worth it. Yeah, I heard about him from Mark Graney. So that's the way these things work. Just word of mouth.
Well, and Mark, both of you guys have, and Don. I mean, all you guys, all of us. They know how to make it look right. And folks, Cold Snap, the book that we've been talking about today, and it'll leave you frigid. This is going to drop next Tuesday, the 26th, so be sure to get a copy today. And if you'd like to learn more about my pal Mark, just visit markcameronbooks.com. Thanks, authorbytes.com. Or follow Twitter. And Mark's getting good at this, folks, so give him a little bit of time, but he's going to be a Twitter maniac before you know it, and he's at Mark Cameron 1. You're actually saying, I don't know, Dave, I've got, matter of fact, hold on a second, I've got you pulled up over here. You've got 861 followers.
Yeah, see, there you go, 861 as opposed to a bajillion. I don't, those poor 861.
I'm excited because I'm at the very top of your feed there because you're saying you're looking forward to this. So I hope the show was everything you hoped it would be, Mark.
It was great fun because you ask different questions. We're going into a book like this. We'll have a dozen of these, and a lot of times it'll be the same thing. But I think people are getting used to Zoom and remote interviews and learning, and you've certainly done a great job. This has been fun.
Well, thank you, Mark. And you know what? I did radio for 25 years, and I had producers that worked with me, and I always said this. I said, give me just a note or two. Don't give me too much, because the way I find an interview being fascinating is to have a little bit of knowledge, but let you tell the stories. The people who go, so tell me, Mark, when you were a U.S. Marshal back in, who cares, man? Just
exactly.
Let's tell stories.
Yep, exactly. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this.
Man, I hope we can stay in touch. I have a feeling, you give off this feeling like we've known each other forever.
Yeah, it's my tactical grandpa. That's just me.
And always carry an orange Zippo, folks.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Mark, you take care of yourself, and thank you again for joining us on the Thriller Zone.
Hey, thanks for your time. It was great fun.
How much fun was that? Mark Cameron, did he strike you the same way he struck me? Kind of like you've known him forever? That's how I walked away feeling. Great guy, super talent. I mean, anybody who's writing Tom Clancy novels, you got to be on top of your game. So once again, thank you, Mark. Now, on our next show coming up on Monday, a bonus episode, this gal right here, Alma Katsu, Red Widow is the book. It is a stunning performance. And she's like 6 books in, but I'm telling you, bam, she's coming up on Monday. And I'm looking ahead to the next week, which is Peter Ferris, the devil himself. Oh man, that is going to wrap up the month of April. And we have a heck of a May coming up. Can I share with you just a couple? Joshua Hood is going to be on the show. Tori Eldridge, one of my favorite guests, is going to be on the show. May Cobb is coming up in May. May was my very first guest in June of last year. So we're very excited to be celebrating our 1-year anniversary, basically, with May Cobb, with her book, My Summer Darlings. Also, we're going to squeeze in a little bonus episode with Dave Chesson, the Kindlepreneur, as we go off a little bit the beaten path to learn some inside secrets into the world of publishing. Frank Zaviro is coming up in May. Who else? Well, there's a couple of biggies, but we have not 100% confirmed them yet, so bear with me. And I would look into June and July, but I don't want to share all my candy in the lobby, if you know what I mean. I do want to take this one brief moment to say thank you for the 2 sponsors that are supporting our show. AuthorBytes.com, the web host for authors, and Writer's Block Coffee, which you'll see me sipping on coffee almost all during the show. Writer's Block, oh man, these guys hit it out of the ballpark. And I don't want to turn this into a commercial, but I'm going to tell you this one thing. When you get fresh roasted beans, I mean, you put in your order on a Monday, the order's probably placed on a Tuesday, maybe a Wednesday. It's roasted right then and turned around and shipped to you. Once you get it that way, you'll never do it any other way. 15% off your first order, by the way. Okay, there, I did it. Folks, thank you so much for joining me once again for another episode of The Thriller Zone. I hope it's evidenced how much I love the show and how much I love bringing it to you. You can always drop us an email at thethhrillerzone@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, thethhrillerzone.com. We're now officially youtube.com/thethhrillerzone. So we finally got all of our branding act together. But we love hearing from you. Drop us an email. Go by the podcast channels and leave a review. 5-star reviews doesn't hurt. If you got the time, it'd be great. But we just love hearing from you. And if there's something on the show that you'd like to hear more of, or there's a guest that you'd like to, man, David, here's a great idea, send it to me. If you're an author who would like to be on the show, we book well in advance, and I need to get your books well in advance in order to be able to read them and talk about them. But yeah, it's all doable. We're here to serve. And I love my job. So anyway, Dave Temple here. We'll see you next time on another episode of The Thriller Zone.